My guest today is the legendary songwriter and producer David Malloy. Now, he was recently inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and credited with the creating of the crossover influence sound of country music that designed the genre in the 80s and 90s. Now, he has 41 number one hit songs and multiple Grammy nominations. Now, David Malloy has produced artists like Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Reba McEntire, Rosanne Cash, and more. But in his latest chapter of his life, David releases Mirror, a musical autobiography collection of 14 self penned songs and reflecting on his life's highs and lows. Now, co produced with Paul Childers, the album delves into life lessons of joy, pain, and loss, especially with Mason's Wallet. Now, inspired by Luke Bryan's documentary, David found the closure needed to write about his son Mason, resulting in a raw and emotional journey through grief and healing. But with the release of Mirror in 2024, listeners are invited to connect soul to soul with the exceptional man behind the music. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome that exceptional man, songwriter, producer David Malloy to the show. Welcome, David.
Hi, Ward. How are you doing today? And thank you so much for this chance to talk about my personal music.
Hey, absolutely. Now, I was doing some research, and was your father the inspiration for you becoming a songwriter and producer? Because he's been called the greatest sound engineer of all time.
Well, he was an incredible recording engineer, an incredible man, and I'd say just when you're a kid, you don't realize how lucky you are with the parents that you have. But I was so blessed to have him as a father and as a mentor for me. So. Uh, I grew up in music. It's all I've ever known. As I tell people, my first job was mowing the next door neighbor's yard, and I went from there to going into a recording studio, not knowing anything about it, but knowing that that's what I wanted to do. So basically, starting at the ground up. But when I was 15 years old, my dad and Chet Atkins drove downtown to I think it was Groove and Guitar when they were downtown on Second Avenue, and Chet picked out a little gut string guitar for me. I still have it sitting over here in the corner. A little gut string guitar for me, and meaning the little nylon strings. I guess maybe they call them the nylon string, because he thought that that wouldn't hurt my fingers as I was learning how to play, so I wouldn't quit. And so I had that little guitar, and just started playing around, learning two or three chords, and I just immediately started having melodies and ideas, and I really couldn't complete a sentence, but there was a lot going on down inside there almost instantaneously.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing where people, especially in music, where their careers actually start or where the inspiration is birthed from. And many, it's the moment that they get their first guitar. And then for some, they know exactly what they want to do in life. And then, like you, basically walking into a recording studio and learning, starting at the bottom and working their way up. And that's where some of the greatest producers have started. And I think, well, it's hard to say, who are the ones going to be coming into the future when they start on Pro Tools.
Yeah, when I started at, my father was very good friends with Jack Clement, or Cowboy Jack Clement, as they'd say. Well, another uh, one of my idols, and he had a recording studio called Jack Clement Recording Studio, and I got that. My dad talked him into them hiring me, and I didn't know anything, so I started as we call a gopher, kind of you know make fresh coffee and clean out ashtrays, and and just started learning one little step at a time. But where I was so fortunate was the chief engineer there, Charlie Talent, that I went to work for. He allowed me, once he felt that I was comfortable on the equipment, he allowed me to use the studio when it wasn't booked. And so, yeah, and so we had the first 16 track machine in Nashville. It was at Jackson Recording Studios. So I put in a long piece of leader tape, and long enough for me to hit record and run outside. And back in those times, there wasn't any cartage in the studio, so there was already a drum kit and an organ, and there was congas, and there was amplifiers, and everything was kind of there. So I'd set up something, and then I'd start the tape, and I'd run out, and I just would start banging around, making noise, and starting to build little tracks. So those were kind of the seeds of how it started, and at the same time, I was playing the guitar and trying to, create songs, make up songs, and that was kind of the essence of it, of how it got started.
Well, you have been credited with creating the crossover influence sound of country music that truly defined the 1980s and 90s. How did that crossover sound actually happen?
Well, okay, so that's Eddie Rabbitt. That's where we started that. Okay. And so I met Even Stevens, and Even had a best friend named Eddie Rabbitt. And my father and I went to my father. I said, let's start a publishing company. And he said, why don't you go find us a songwriter, because you work at the recording studio and they like to hang around there. So I went back and I told the secretary, I was Ray Stevens' secretary. It was Ray Stevens' Sound Lab, it was called Ray Studio. So I went to Ray's secretary or assistant, and I said, I'm going to start a publishing company. I need to find a songwriter. And she said, well, there's this guy, Even Stevens, has been hanging around talking to Ray, but I don't think they're going to do anything together. So, so, so I think literally the same day, I jump in my car and I drive down the street. I'm going to the little market down on the corner, and I see him walking down the sidewalk. And so I pull over and I get out of the car, and I said, hey, I said, are you Even Stevens? And he looks at me kind of funny. He says, are you a bill collector? And I said no. I told him who I was, and long story short, anyway. So we started a company with my father, and he was writing with this guy named Eddie Rabbitt. And Eddie Rabbitt, they had a sound on sound two track tape recorder. Now that meant you could bounce from the left side to the right side, and you could add harmonies, your own harmonies, to your vocal. And that was a new sound. Putting somebody singing their own harmonies was a new sound. Up to that point, people brought in background singers, and they were there at the session. It kind of all happened live. But I like the sound that Eddie had when he did his own harmonies with himself. And so we started that from the beginning, and that was part of what was unique and different about the sound of Eddie. And then the other part was, I really had always wanted to be a pop producer and be hanging out in LA. And so I had some of my frustrations with country music, and I kind of took them out on the records we made. And Eddie and Even and I, we weren't afraid to venture in any direction. In fact, so we never really worried about format or genre or style. We just created. And we felt like if we were having the best time we could possibly have in this song we were creating, that would be in the music, and other people would feel that same way, not worrying about the category or the genre. We'll leave that up to somebody else. Let's just try to create some great music. And through that, and not worrying about so much about, can it get played on this country radio station or this radio station, we just created it. And I was so fortunate to be at Elektra Records. Eddie was on Elektra Records at that time, and that was Elektra Asylum. So you had the Eagles and Ronstadt and Jackson Brown, and all this incredible artists that came out there. So they were so open-minded. So in their country division, they didn't have a problem with that music kind of cutting through boundaries. And so we had a lot of support from the adult contemporary promotion staff and the pop promotion staff. And so they were able to take those songs and kind of move them up through the country chart, and then move them across into those other genres. So everything, all the dominoes were set up in the right places.
Well, with Eddie Rabbitt, I'm trying to think back. Was it the song "You and I"? Was that the biggest crossover that he
So
had?
that was with Crystal Gale, and that was written by Frank Myers, who went on to write "I Swear" and several big songs. And it was Frank's very first recording. Was that song? I was producing Tanya Tucker for Clive Davis, and at that point, Arista did not have a country label, and I was doing this record, and I was trying to make Clive happy, and I was trying to make Tanya happy, and I had my hands full. And so this guy Frank Myers, who was playing in Eddie Raven's band, and Eddie Raven was a good friend of Tanya's, kept hanging around and was wanting to play me songs. I said, I don't have time to listen to songs right now. I said, go down and get with my father and play him songs. My father calls me back a few hours later. He says, listen, this guy Frank Myers has got a song I think is a big hit. It's a ballad called "You and I." Okay, and we had never done a ballad, and we had never done a duet. And at that point, we had written all the songs, and so along came that song, and I don't know. Lover Rainy Night was number one in multiple formats, driving my life away. So I can't say that You and I was the biggest one, but I think it did win an ASCAP award like 7 years in a row or something crazy. You know?
Well, the crossover sound must have been a great plus for you because, like you had just mentioned, it actually expanded you producing in multiple genres from pop, rock, and country.
Yes, exactly. And so we get done with one of these records, okay. And I'll tell you one that really turned everybody's head around was the Suspicions on Eddie Rabbitt, that song, because it had really nothing to do with country, and it went on to win the BMI Most Played Country Song of the Year. But so we would turn in this music to the record label, and then I would sit with the head of promotion, a guy named Kenny Batiste at the time, and he put it on and listen to the acetate, the sample of it, and he'd look at me and he'd be kind of going like this, and he'd go, yeah, he says, I don't know what this is though. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do with this, but I love it. So there again, back to that thing that we had a company that was all about hit records. Electric Sound was about hit records. It wasn't about does it fit this exact radio station, stuff like that. It was just about making some hit music. And of course, that was back in the time before we had algorithms and everything that we have. And if a radio, if a disc jockey really loved something, he was getting reaction from his audience, he'd tell friends or pass it on, and music would grow and expand. And we don't have that now. I kind of wonder, So it's been
Yeah.
interesting in my own music, the Mirror album that I did, and then seeing, if it does the David Malloy playlist, what are my algorithms, so to speak? In other words, who plays behind me or who plays around me? It's really been an eye opener to see just where the computer puts you. And now we're talking AI and all this stuff, and they're all kind of like, head turning about what our future is going to be.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's funny because I've talked to so many artists, and from the past legends to up and coming new artists. And I was talking to one not too long ago, and they said, "I wish we were really back in the day where we had to jump in our car, take a stack of 45s, and go from radio station to radio station to pitch our record." She goes, "I really wish we were back in that time again because
yeah,
if you had that one DJ could turn a nobody into a superstar."
that's right. That's exactly right. And of course, that's because that DJ was getting positive feedback from his audience, or he wouldn't have done it. He not only did that DJ, he or she believe in that piece of music, but it was reinforced by the reaction they were getting from their listeners. And
Well,
he
yeah.
breaks it.
Well,
So I mean, my Lord, how many records have been broken that way, one at a time like that? Classics, things we'll remember our whole lives.
well, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for Loretta Lynn jumping in her car and going from station to station, she never would have been the queen of country music.
Yeah. Okay, that also means you really got to believe in yourself, doesn't it? It's not just push a button, let me see what people think. I mean, you had to really stick it out there. So you had to really believe, and you had to truly be committed.
Well,
So,
yeah.
but
And what's
yeah,
funny is when I was reading about your background, I really kind of started laughing because of the fact that a lot of people today criticize today's country music. And I'm like, if you listen to today's country, then go back and listen to, let's say, maybe some of the late 70s, get into the
right.
80s, get into the 90s. Is there really, truly a difference? Because you do have that heavy pop overtone, but I love 80s, 90s country.
Yeah, yeah. There's not a huge difference. I mean, sonically, it's basically, it's for the most part they're building it totally on the computer. So yeah, does it sound louder? Is it, is it sound, is everything perfect? Kind of like, so there is a difference in the sounds, but as far as, and I think they build the tracks bigger. I think there's more layering now, maybe than there might have been, at that time, maybe you had one guitar. Now you might use two or three things to create a sound instead of necessarily one thing. So, but the essence, it's still based on a story. It still has to be relatable. And people have asked me, said, God, how do you feel? Music's different now. Do you hate it or this or that? I said, no, you don't understand. It's called popular music. That means it's popular, okay? If you figured out how to create popular music, I applaud you. I give you a standing ovation. It's not an easy thing to do. I have no bitterness about anything changing. We're artists. It's like it was sound. We're painting pictures, and maybe there's a time and place, and everybody in the world loves our picture, and you know what I mean. So I don't carry any bitterness about it, about time marching on or whatever it might be, and who's to say that I still can't create something that catches an ear or multiple ears and then moves on and
Well,
becomes
yeah, I mean, for you, I mean, you produce legendary artists like Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Reba, of course, like you said,
yeah,
Eddie Rabbitt, and
yeah.
others. For you, what are some of your greatest memories of being in the studio with them?
Uh, the Kenny Rogers Love Will Turn You Around was a very unique experience. We've been working with Eddie Rabbitt was at that time one of the biggest artists going, and Kenny was making a movie called Six Pack, and they didn't have any music uh, or a signature single for it yet. And so I got a call from his uncle Leland Rogers, who was running a lot of his business, about seeing if we could come up with something. And I said, "What's it about?" And he said, "Well, he's going to be a NASCAR driver." And so I said, "Well, it would really help is if I could see him perform somewhere and see his audience and his fans." And so Leland said, "Well, he's going to be playing Louisville, Kentucky, I think, like the next night or something, something that random." And I said, "Okay, well, we'll drive up there." So I said to Eve, and I said, "Let's drive up there and come along with me, and let's meet with Kenny Rogers." And we were rocking at the time, so I said, "Let's get a tour bus and a driver." And it's a 3 hour drive. So we get a tour bus, and we've got a driver on this bus, and we set up a little amp in there, and a couple of guitars. And I said, we'll work on some songs. I said, let's see if we can't get something started, before we meet with him. So we get there, and we're backstage, and he walks in, and all of a sudden we're both like, wow, wow, wow. We couldn't remember what we started. And so he's kind of looking at us, and and even had a guitar. He says, "Give me that guitar. Let me show you something." And he tuned the E string down, and he went bum 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 bum. And he started playing the little figure, and he goes, "How do you know where to stay or to go? How do you know if it's real? He said, "That's all I've got." He said, "See if you can make something out of that." And I said, "What do you want it to be about?" He says, "I don't know." He said, "Just see my show. You'll figure out something." So we went and had our seats, and it was right in like the front of the stage, and we didn't have anything recorded. There's no iPhone at the time, so you didn't have it recorded. So in between the songs, even and I would sing that little piece back and forth because to ourselves, and we thought, well, if we can get that little piece in the song, then we'll get this. And so after that night on the way home, we called Tom Schuyler, another Hall of Fame writer, and sang him a little piece. Met him that next morning. He had a good portion of that song written. It stayed up that night. Long story short, I think it was 3 or 4 days later from the first phone call, I was in LA in the studio with Kenny Rogers to record that song. And we had a 10 a.m. downbeat for the session for Love Will Turn You Around for the movie. And so I get there about 9:15 early, and Kenny's in there, and the movie people are already in there, and he's got his road band in the studio, and they're already working on the song. We weren't going to start till 10. Kenny's sitting at the console next to his engineer. The whole room's full of movie people, and I'm walking in, I'm listening, and it sounds like crap. Okay. And we'd already sent a demo that he loved. It was nothing like the demo or anything. So, and it hadn't been 10 minutes, and so I said, "Hey," Kenny turns around to me, he goes, "What do you think?" And I stand there and I said, can we go outside and talk a minute? So he says, okay. So we walk out of the control room, and I said to him, I said, this is a dream for me to get to work with you. I mean, and he said, well, if I could have done it without you, I would have. So I said, well, listen, I said, this isn't working. This sounds terrible. He says, you're right. He says, I'm going to take a tennis lesson. You go in there and fire. And it was his road band that he'd been promising to take into the studio. So my first thing is I have to walk into the studio and fire Kenny's road band, and he's gone. So yeah, really. So within a day and a half, I think we cut it 3 times to finally got to be what became the single local tribute.
That is crazy. And that really brings up my next question because your songs have been recorded by people like Badfinger and even Fleetwood Mac, which
Yeah,
did In the
yeah.
Back of My Mind, for example. What do you
I
think?
love that cut, by the way. I just thought it was so great. And I thought, man, I've got the grand slam. Burley Burnett and I are writing that song in the back of my mind. Billy's in the band, right? He's one of my best pals. We're writing this song, and we wrote the bridge, and we had the part where we wanted Stevie to sing, the answers to Billy. We wanted Christine to sing the bridge, and it all worked like that. It all came together just like we had written it. And so I'm talking to Billy, and I said, how's it going? He said, oh, it's going incredible. He said, we've had to tie 2 consoles together. We've got 106 tracks working on it, right? So the first thing I think to myself, 106 tracks, it's never going to see the light of day. It's gotten too complicated, you know what I mean? So they'd had it, and Mick added this monster intro to it. So, anyways, you know what? They put it in their anthology of greatest hits. And so, even though it's never a single, it's a just huge, huge honor for me to be associated with that band and with that record and Billy, because I am, obviously, like the whole world, a huge fan of their music.
Well, for you, what do you think about others' interpretation of your songs when you're not the producer?
Uh, you know, I've always been the producer, but in that case, I wasn't the producer, and I didn't know till years later they were considering hiring me as the producer. They should have, but I was. It's a little bit weird, I'm so used to being the captain of the ship, so it's a little bit strange, but there's also that surprise of when they do something you never would have thought of, so. But it really, honestly, for everything that put me in the Songwriter Hall of Fame, I was the producer. I made all the records.
I always found it interesting because I would talk to songwriters and they would bring up some of their hit songs that they wrote, but they didn't
Right.
produce it with the
Yeah,
artist. And then they would say, yeah, the first time I heard their rendition of my song, I hated it. And then 20
yeah,
years later, they're like, now I get it.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's that. Yeah, I remember even Stevens um, uh, "When You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman," Doctor Hook.
Oh,
Even had written that song as a ballad, and Ron Halfkin made it an up-tempo kind of a mid-tempo dance song. And I know when he even first heard it, it really kind of took him back because it wasn't at all what he had intended. When he first wrote the song. So yeah, I mean, it does happen. And, sometimes you need somebody who steps outside your box, and it's like when you're the producer and that when you hire a guitar player and he comes in and he puts on a guitar part you never thought of in 1,000 years. When you first hear it, you're going, "Wow!" I mean, I don't know, it scares me, it scares me. And then you listen, and you go, "Wow, no, it's really great. I really like it." It's that element of surprise about it, and somebody else's imagination. Which is one of the great things about recording with a band that doesn't happen very much anymore. When you get a band in the studio together live, and you get that collective brain power, and now when you sit on the computer and you start adding your tracks and doing everything and eliminating that, so I always like that as I call collective brain power, getting a room full. Basically, you're hiring the greatest musicians. You get a room full of geniuses in the room.
well, yeah. And you bring up Dr. Hook, which I think um, he's always been underrated. And
Yeah.
Doctor Hook, I love all of Doctor Hook's songs. I mean, that genre, I could listen to that all day long. And like with you and Even Stevens, you had 16 number one hits between you. How would you define the magic between you and Even when it came to songwriting?
Well, that would really be. It's hard. You know what? We're like a three-legged table. I can't think of even without thinking about Eddie. And it's like the three of us came together to create a superhuman named Eddie Rabbitt, and who went on and made incredible crossover records that changed music. Put kind of put a little bend in the river, so to speak. And years later, when you've got incredibly talented young artists and coming up through the ranks and saying, "Wow, it was one of your songs that I heard the first time that changed, or maybe you decide I was coming to Nashville or whatever it may be." Those are just or when somebody says, "I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing the first time I heard your record." That's like the greatest compliment ever. When you just it's like, kind of like a timestamp. You know.
It is. I mean, just think. I mean, here you are, this incredible, successful songwriter. You're in the National Songwriters Hall of Fame, and your songs are being played somewhere around the world every day, bringing back memories for everyone who listens to these songs, and for those who may hear them for the very first time. There's a new memory being created. That must feel very special and maybe a bit overwhelming.
It is. I feel. I always felt very responsible for the music I was making. I felt like millions of people were going to hear it, and so I always wanted it to feel positive, even if the particular song was about a heartache or something like that. I mean, I still wanted it to feel positive because I feel like music is such an incredibly powerful thing, uh, and and so I've just taken that as a big responsibility. It's not the first thoughts in your head. Look, every song and everything it starts with a seed of inspiration. It's like it's a birth. It's always like a birth and a thing. And a lot of what we're talking about here, Ward, is like when you look back on it, you find these words to describe it and put it on a shelf in a little corner or whatever. But at the time, uh, it's not that. It's not a clear picture. Easy looking back, see a clear picture. But I always felt like when I was working on records, it's a little like if you were sticking your hand through a hole in a box, trying to grab onto something you didn't quite know what it was in your hand. You couldn't quite feel it. You're a little scared. What if it bites me? What have I got? What have I got my hand on? It's kind of that kind of a feeling. I never really could say that I had complete clarity about any of those creations or productions. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It was all,
I know exactly what you mean, and I want to get into talking about this brand new album, Mirror, which I fell in
okay.
love with. So I'm going to be completely honest and upfront. I fell in love with this album for multiple reasons. But in 2005, you lost your son Mason. Did you walk
Right.
away from the music industry completely at that time?
Uh, you go numb. No parent should lose a child, and for all of your listeners, my heart goes out to you if you experienced this. Uh, so Ward, it's just grief is a funny thing, and everybody's entitled to their grief and how they want to grieve and how long they want to grieve, and you realize it's not something that you ever get over. You just kind of get around it. And if you look back, it's still like in the middle of the road, so to speak. You know what I mean? But you went around it. So it. I never had really openly expressed my grief or honored my son, and I felt like I didn't start a fund or a tuition or something in his name. I, I didn't do anything, and I always kind of felt a guilt about that a little bit, like I love my boy, and I need to somehow publicly honor my son and honor my love for my son. Okay. And so that led to the Luke Bryan story, and moved out to this golf course. And Luke's a member at this golf course. And I know a little bit about his music, not much, and because I really wasn't listening much to country radio. And so my wife Kathy said, he's got a documentary, this 3-part documentary. Why don't you watch it? So I thought, yeah, I'll do, because I'm going to run into him, and I want to, anyways, know more about him. So I watched this documentary, and I did not realize that he had lost his brother that he was very tight with. And then I think a couple of years later, he'd lost his sister, and then had taken his sister's kids and then raised them. Okay. And anyways, through him telling this in the documentary, I found more closure with the loss of my own son. And I wrote this song called Mason's Wallet. And so I have my son's wallet, okay? And I've carried it in my right front pocket every day since I lost him, since I've had it. And so that's what I wrote in the song. I put Mason's wallet in my right front pocket 18 years ago. Genuine buffalo hide, guaranteed to last a lifetime. If I opened it up, I had a stamp of a buffalo on there. So I trust it with the memories that it holds. And so I wrote this song. And after writing this song, it kind of opened up the floodgates in me, and I started writing more songs about me. Not thinking, a million people will like this or relate to it. It wasn't. It was just a very personal thing, And so the songs are born. There's one in there where Kathy, we're on our second marriage, and she'd say, "God, I wish we'd have met years ago. I mean, when you were having all this hits, could you imagine what we could have done with that money and how we'd be doing, And I'd say, well, you know what? I wouldn't. I don't know if you'd have liked that guy back then. Okay, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm this guy now. Okay, and I had to go through these things. So I wrote that. It's one of the songs that became one of the songs in the album. So the album's full of songs like that. So I kind of thought, well, you know what? If you want to know who I am, for whatever reason, listen to that album. You'll know who I am. You'll get a good sense of it. And Mason's Wallet was really kind of what started that word.
Yeah, Mason's Wallet is it's a very beautiful song. And I think that song, even for others who will listen to it, that may have gone through the exact same thing you did, could find healing from that song. And not only that, ladies and gentlemen, not only do you want to listen to the song, you need to go to David's website to watch the video, because I think the video even adds more to the beauty of this song. Because I've listened to your album over and over again. I went and watched some of the videos, which I loved every single one of them.
Thank you so much for it. Thank you for taking the time to dig in. I appreciate it.
Well, I'll tell you how far I dug in. I even had to listen to this song before our interview because I love this song so much. A Brand New Day. That's the name of the song, ladies and gentlemen. It's the first cut on David Malloy's album. This is a very happy day. I listened to it. I want to go on a road trip. This song makes me want to go on a road trip in a convertible with the top down. Yeah. It's very 1970s pop rock sound, has a bit of an acoustic sound of America, but also, but I had to go back, David, because I'm like, okay, I'm literally listening to this song and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I know that sound. So I find this acoustic sound of America, but then there's this little bit of Sammy John's Chevy van in there, but then there's even a little bit of Jeff Lynne. So you've given us the wake up feeling good anthem that we didn't know we needed.
Thank you so much, man. That's the greatest compliment I think I've ever had on that song. Lord, I got goosebumps on me. Thank you so much, man. Because that's everything I wanted that song to do, okay? That song is about hope and second chances. And that every morning when we wake up, we are blessed to have another opportunity, man, to take on the world, whatever that may be, to leave problems behind, or however you want to approach it. So that's what I wanted that song. I wanted it to be a wake up song, and I wanted you to feel good, and I wanted to go, yeah, I've been blessed with another day, and and the things I could do in one day, the changes I can make or whatever. So that's what I wanted. Thank you so much for that compliment. It means the world to me.
Oh man, it's an awesome song. And then there's another song on there, and I'm going to go through some of these songs on this album because, ladies and gentlemen, you have to get this album. I mean, I'm the type that loves the music from the '70s, even into some of the '80s. Even John Ford Cole and I laughed because we both love yacht rock, and we're not embarrassed to say that because that's really some of the greatest songs ever written and produced,
Yeah.
and they're just artistry. But you have a song called "I Prayed Today." I love that mellow gospel sound, and that Hammond B3 just added the perfect touch.
I prayed today. Thank you. I've done a few other interviews. You're the first person to bring up that song. That song means a lot to me. I feel I'm a very spiritual person. I don't know if I'm really a very religious person, but I do believe in prayer and the power of prayer. And uh, that song was inspired by the PGA professional golfer Ben Crane. He is out at this club where I'm at, and he was taking me around and showing me properties and stuff, and he's and we talked some while we were doing it, spent some time together, and he was talking about his faith and how strong it is within him, and I started writing. I prayed today, and I remember reciting uh, a little of the lyric to him a few days later, saying I'm working on this song, and what the most powerful part of that song to me, I feel we're so divided. I feel there's such division uh, as a nation, as a world, and I know I know we all want one love, and I know we all, that's what we want. That's what we're praying for, and so that last verse of that song about what a heavy load it is for God to carry. I pray that God can carry the load, you know, because the world's so divided, and so I just there again, it's another one of those songs you mentioned that's just my true personal feelings about life.
This whole album, David, is just it's a kaleidoscope of different sounds and melodies, and it's an awesome album. And you have a couple of real rocking tunes on this album too. I Play Gimme Shelter, which is
Yeah,
a very hot song, but who in the world is that fabulous background voice? She's fantastic.
Jackie Wilson. Thank you for asking. I'm so happy to talk about Jackie Wilson. Geez, she's not in the video. I wish she was out on the road and I couldn't get her. And that's a band in East Nashville, and that literally we shot that video in their garage, which is their rehearsal studio. But Jackie Wilson, y'all, if you get a chance, she's incredible. Or didn't she really? She really is. Amazing, amazing singer. She's out on the road with an artist right now. But she when I was doing my two favorite Stones songs, and it wasn't like I was more of a Beatles guy than I guess I was a Stones guy. But as I got older, the Let It Bleed album with "Gimme Shelter" and "Sympathy for the Devil" and that, I just love those. I love the congas. I love the feel. I love how the way they started up and the way they kind of got you going. And so when I wrote "I Play Gimme Shelter," I was trying to combine those two songs. And then in the production, I was like trying to get the feel of those two songs in there. And I do thanks. And to do I Play Gimme Shelter, you've got to have, I forget her name, Marion, whoever the famous singer is that did on the original Gimme Shelter record. But I needed somebody to come in and do that part. And Jackie was the obvious choice. You can she's just got that big, incredible voice, and she can nail anything you want her to sing.
Well, I love the music video.
Thanks. I had so much fun making that video. God.
I mean,
Andrew Rosario has made all three of those videos. He's wonderful, delightful, and it's all on a shoestring budget, in this day and age, right? So,
well, here's what
just
well, David, here's what I loved about your music videos. I had to watch them more than once because I loved them so much, but it brought me back to the time when MTV used to actually play music videos and where
yeah,
music videos were very creative, they were artistic, they were fun. And now they're all, yeah, let's go stand out in the desert and sing our song. No, yours brings back why we used to sit in front of MTV for hours watching music videos, and you brought that back to us.
thank you. Well, there again, it was, even with Andrew, it was just that process. We did those videos the same way that I wrote the songs, just as real and as organic as we could, and I just like I always feel like music should be like a roller coaster or a ride, and we all get on and we all travel together, and there's peaks and valleys, and I think like an album should have peaks and valleys, I don't think every song should be slamming in your face or anything. It should be highs and lows to it, and we kind of we were all riding together, on this kind of peaks and valleys, and so I wanted to get those. So even though I was writing all these songs, the producer in me still wanted this to be a very listenable album because I miss listening to albums. Nashville's got into a thing where every time you're in the studio, you tried to cut a hit every single time. Okay. Well, when you get 10 attempts at hits together, it doesn't necessarily make an album enjoyable to listen to over and over. Sometimes it's too exhausting because every song, they've poured everything into every song, and there's nowhere to catch your breath, so to speak, as a listener. So I
Boy, did
wanted
you hit the nail on the head with that one because you're right. The albums need to flow.
yes,
Some albums have themes to them. Yours is like a fun roller coaster ride.
thanks. That was another thing. Even like with the Matthew McConaughey thing. All right, all right, all right. I wrote that song. I love that saying. And so wrote that. So I had a lot of fun doing this, and of course talking about it. And here's the funny thing. I was never trying to be an artist. This is the first time I ever recorded any music on myself in my whole career ever.
You missed your calling.
No, I never. I just, what, Roy Orbison and people would come over to the house when I was a teenager, and they would sing, and they were like bigger than life and blew my mind. And I thought I could never be bigger than life like that. That's too much. But I want to make hit records, and I want to work in the studio. But to be out there and be that. So just it was just a kind of a thing. Almost more like a calling word. Like I had to do this. And so I still don't
Well, I'm
necessarily
glad
think
you
of myself,
did because it was funny. You
you
bring up, yeah, because you bring up all right, all right, all right, and that song has got that Jerry Lee Lewis jamming piano, but and I had to keep going back because I love the short guitar solo, and I'm like, I know that sound, I know that. Who is that? And I'm thinking maybe it's a little bit of Chuck Berry guitar in there. Um, and then I got to thinking that would be one of the best songs to play live. I mean, any venue,
Yeah.
everybody would literally go wild over that song.
All the guitar work is Paul Childers, and he was my producer. We did it together, but he did all the guitar work, and he's for you listeners out there, Paul Childers, he's a great artist in his own right, very super talented. But he did the brilliant guitar work, and actually in that song, the solo was longer, and I cut it down. It is a short solo. As a producer, I'm a little of that less is more kind of. I'd rather my listener want to hit the start button and play it again because they can't get enough of it than getting too much of it. And I approach my productions that way. What we're doing, what you're doing in producing, you're fighting boredom. You don't want your listener to ever get bored. Like, bored, it's no different than you and I talking right now or whatever. We never want our fans to get bored. We always want to be engaging. We always want them to stay with us through the whole ride. And production is that it's that same thing. How do I, so you always have to put yourself in the place of your listener. If I'm listening to this music, what's going to keep me entertained? And I've always been very sensitive about that, about making sure that there's. I always said to myself, fighting boredom. Making sure that there's some ear candy or something going on, or a change happens, or
But
something.
here's what you've done. Okay. First of all, you have not lost your touch when it comes to writing songs and producing. Your songs make the sun shine a little bit brighter, and you add the extra sparkle to every star in the sky. So I hope you get back into producing other artists because the music industry needs that magical touch that only you can give because your album Mirror is absolutely fantastic. When I
Uh,
listen to music every day, especially when I'm researching all of my guests, I'm writing up the interviews and really
is that
digging
an
deep.
ovation, by the way, or what?
What? Go
Is
ahead.
that an ovation behind you? That
Uh,
guitar?
Les Paul and an ovation.
Yeah, okay. The ovation. Eddie Rabbitt loved an ovation. That was his thing on stage, was an ovation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ward, I don't know. I'm turning red here, man. You're embarrassing me. But your
Well, let me
you
explain because
you
I
want to be my
love
manager?
what now?
You want to be my manager?
I guess I guess
I
so.
need to wave that banner, Ward.
Well, I will tell you this. So I think the 1970s when it comes to pop rock and even some of the country, they're the best lyrics. And we all and me and some of my friends always kind of laugh because we're like, that they were probably smoking dope and using LSD, but that's probably okay because that's where some of the greatest songs ever came from. But it's
Yeah.
these songs and your song, this album Mirror brings back that exact magic that when we listen to these songs on your album, we can visualize our own story. We can visualize, okay, this is what David's is singing. So we have this movie
Yeah.
playing in our head. You've brought that back. I literally cannot stand today's music because it doesn't give me that visualization that goes through my mind, which, yeah, maybe it is a kaleidoscope, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds kind of thing. Who knows? But you brought us that back.
Wow. That's a lot to live up to, Ward.
You're in the Hall of
But
Fame. You've already lived up to it.
I mean, honestly, thank you so much because you've hit every key word or whatever you call it, bullet point word. Honestly, you really have for me. When I went in to make this album, it's everything that you said, and that's all I could ever hope for with the listener. And like I said, I was in that thing about if musically we can touch soul to soul. It's like kind of, what I'm saying. I'm pouring my soul out there, and I'm hoping that some of my stories and my music touches somebody. Like maybe I pray today helps free somebody up a little bit, or another, or brand new day puts a smile on somebody's face with a cup of coffee, and they smile at the first person they see, and that smile gets passed on through the day. You know what I mean? You're saying all those things were that I could ever hope that this music would do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you this. No, you know what? I'm going to promise you this. If you get David Malloy's album Mirror, and if you wake up in the morning in a grumpy, bad mood, you need to play a brand new day, and you need to listen to it. Sit down with your cup of coffee. Don't look at your phone. Just listen to the song, and I will guarantee you will be pulled out of that grumpy, crappy mood the moment you hear the song because you're like, yeah, life is meant to be lived, and we need to live it with a smile on our face.
Ward, it's exactly what I said after losing my son, Mason, was life is for living, and we have an obligation to live. And every day we're given another opportunity to live it to its fullest. And that's exactly right. And you know what, Ward? This whole album's cheaper than a cup of coffee. I'm not trying to make money here. I'm just trying to put something out there that maybe helps or does something or somebody enjoys, you know?
Well, I can't wait to see what you do next. And there are so
I've
many
got a new
artists
one.
today
You know,
that
I'm
need your
working on a new
touch.
song right now. I'm working on a new one word right now. In fact, 1 minute before I clicked on this camera, I was sticking some harmonies on it and I was singing, this is my new favorite. That's one of the great things about music. You know what I mean? Each one's your baby and each one, each one becomes your favorite. And, you go off into dreamland with your little song and you start putting the pieces together. It's a wonderful experience.
Man, well, ladies and gentlemen, I love music. You know I love music. And David Malloy's new album, Mirror, is a must have and it's a must listen. It is very rare to hear songs today that we can actually sing along to and make us feel good. And he has songs that tug at your heart, and then he gives us songs that make us want to rock out with a smile on our face. David's album Mirror takes me back to the days when songs contributed to making memories and added some sunshine to our lives. Now, David Malloy brings back the purest of songwriting and music that wakes up and stirs the soul. And David Malloy is back and he has given us the music, the beauty of music we've been missing for over a decade. And David, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program. And I've got to encourage all of my viewers and listeners. You got to head over to davidmalloymusic.com. Check out his current videos, which are just as cool as his album. David, man, I've had a blast with you.
I have too, Lord. Thank you so much. This has been my favorite interview. I appreciate this so much. And thank you. You hit all my bullet points. That's all I can say. And just thanks for the opportunity again. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the music.
Hey, you are so very welcome. And I literally, I've got that album tagged and saved, and I'm going to be listening to it more and more. Just like I said, I listened to A Brand New Day before we came on, just so I could hear that happy melody and happy beat to that song. And ladies and gentlemen, again, go to davidmalloymusic.com. Check out his brand new album, Mirror. And let me tell you something. You got to add this one to your collection. You know, I'm a big believer in buying music. Buy the music. Don't download it for free. I know he said he's not here to make money off the album, but I will tell you this. Buy the album. Add it to your collection. And I have it embedded into my mind, David.
Ward, we're all mirrors to somebody. So always, be careful where you shine. So,
Oh, I love that, David. I love it. I think that's a song in the making.
might be. I mean, that's how they happen, isn't it? So.
That's it. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching and listening. And you can catch all of the replays of our celebrity interviews on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, as well as iTunes and Spotify and our many other digital platforms. So be sure to subscribe as we have more superstars coming your way. And as for me, hey, it's a brand new day, and I'll see you next time.